Africa, Today, News, New York, Weekly News. Roundup. The week opened with ceasefire hopes in Ukraine and closed with hard questions from the Congo to the cruise lanes of the Atlantic. This is the Africa Today News Weekly Roundup. Headlines. Putin declared the Russia-Ukraine war was coming to an end as a weekend ceasefire held. Costa Rica swore in its youngest president with a pledge to wage war on crime. Washington moved to revoke passports of parents owing child support. Countries race to evacuate nationals from a hantavirus-stricken cruise ship off Spain. 9 miners killed in a Colombian gas explosion that inspectors had warned about. Mélenchon announced a fourth run for the French presidency. Musk settled SEC lawsuit over delayed Twitter disclosures with a $1.5 million fine. Amnesty accused ADF fighters of war crimes and crimes against humanity in eastern Congo. US lawmaker demanded action after gunmen attacked mourners in Plateau State. Nigeria stepped up efforts to reverse its American religious freedom blacklist. FIFA capped Toronto World Cup ticket resales at face value. Baseball Hall of Famer Bobby Cox died at 84. Turning to world affairs this week. Russian President Vladimir Putin told reporters over the weekend that the war in Ukraine was coming to an end. He signalled openness to discussing new European security arrangements, his most conciliatory public tone since the full-scale invasion began more than 4 years ago. Both sides had agreed to a temporary ceasefire through the weekend, brokered in part by President Trump, who told reporters he wanted to see a much longer pause. "I'd like to see a big extension," Trump said. Costa Rica inaugurated Laura Fernandez as president on Friday. The 39-year-old right-wing politician used her inaugural address to declare war on organised crime, warning that her country could no longer tolerate drug traffickers finding cracks in its institutions. She promised deep reforms to the judiciary and security apparatus and had already named Gerald Campos as security minister the previous week, charging him with what she called a heavy-handed campaign against criminal networks. The combative tone was striking for a nation long regarded as Central America's most peaceful. The US State Department announced it would begin revoking passports belonging to Americans with significant unpaid child support. The threshold was set at $2,500 in outstanding debt, though officials said enforcement would target the most serious cases. The department described the policy as a tool to hold parents to what it called their legal and moral obligations. A hantavirus outbreak aboard the Dutch cruise ship MV Hondius, docked near Spain's Canary Islands, killed 3 people and triggered an international evacuation effort. Spain flew 14 nationals from Tenerife to a military hospital in Madrid for mandatory quarantine. France arranged its own flights to Paris, and the United Kingdom prepared to do the same. Workers on the airport tarmac in Tenerife pulled hazmat suits over evacuees and hosed them down before boarding. Scenes that underscored how seriously governments treated the threat. 9 coal miners died in a gas explosion at a mine in Sutatosa, north of Bogotá, Colombia. Rescue teams pulled 6 others out alive. The disaster carried a bitter footnote. Colombia's mining agency had inspected the operation less than a month earlier and warned of a dangerous gas buildup. The operators apparently failed to act. Informal mining, much of it conducted without basic safety measures, continues to make Colombia's extractive sector one of the most lethal in the region. Jean-Luc Mélenchon confirmed on Sunday that he would seek the French presidency again in 2027. "Yes, I am a candidate," the 74-year-old told TF1 television. It will be his 4th run. Mélenchon, who leads the hard-left La France Insoumise party, placed 3rd in 2022 behind Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron. He has held ministerial posts in past governments and spent decades as the dominant voice of the French left, admired and divisive in roughly equal measure. Elon Musk resolved a civil lawsuit brought by the US Securities and Exchange Commission over his tardy disclosure of his initial Twitter stake in 2022. A trust in Musk's name agreed to pay a $1.5 million fine. Musk did not admit wrongdoing and, critically, kept all of the estimated $150 million he allegedly saved by waiting to go public with his purchases. The deal awaits approval from a federal judge in Washington, who had earlier rejected Musk's attempt to have the case thrown out. Closer to home and the African continent. Amnesty International released a report documenting what it described as war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the Allied Democratic Forces across eastern Congo. The Islamic State-linked ADF carried out mass attacks on civilians, abducted people for forced labour, recruited children into its ranks, and subjected women and girls to forced marriage, forced pregnancy, and widespread sexual violence. Amnesty warned that with international attention consumed by the Rwanda-backed M23 armed group's territorial advances, the ADF had exploited the distraction to intensify its own campaign across vast stretches of the east. Gunmen opened fire on mourners at a mass burial in Barkin Ladi, Plateau State, killing several people and wounding many others. The victims had gathered to bury 7 community members who had themselves been killed in earlier violence. US lawmaker Riley Moore responded by calling on President Trump to take what he described as forceful action to protect Christians in Nigeria. Police had not officially confirmed the attack at the time of reporting. Nigeria's federal government intensified diplomatic efforts to get the country removed from Washington's Country of Particular Concern designation. President Trump placed Nigeria on the list in 2025, citing the government's failure to address what he called severe and systematic violations of religious freedom, driven by the persecution of Christians and perceived inaction against Boko Haram and Fulani militia violence. Foreign Affairs Minister Bianca Odumegwu Ojukwu disclosed that the issue was raised directly when US Chargé d'Affaires David Heffern visited her in Abuja. And in sports and culture this week, FIFA updated its ticket resale rules for the 2026 World Cup after Ontario passed legislation banning the sale of event tickets above face value. Under the revised terms, tickets for the 6 matches scheduled at Toronto Stadium could only be listed on FIFA Marketplace at their original purchase price. FIFA had pulled Toronto tickets from the platform the previous week, while it adjusted to the province's new Putting Fans First Act, and restored them once the policy was aligned. Bobby Cox, the Hall of Fame manager who guided the Atlanta Braves to the 1995 World Series championship and earned Manager of the Year honours 4 times, died at the age of 84. The Braves did not disclose a cause of death. In a statement, the club called Cox the finest manager ever to wear its uniform and a favourite across the baseball world, particularly among the players he developed over a career that earned him enshrinement in Cooperstown in 2014. That is all for this edition of the Africa Today News Weekly Roundup. We'll be back next weekend with the stories that matter.